Good morning, everybody. While we wait for a few more attendees to get logged in, let's get started by doing a quick sound and quality check. If you're able to hear me and see the PowerPoint screen, please give me a quick wave. All right, I see a couple hands. Thank you so much. All righty, so we've got a couple waves, so we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you again. Welcome to the Form and Function webinar. We are excited to provide you with clear and concise updates that have been made in the Texas Administrative Code, updates on the upcoming edition of the Science of Teaching Reading Requirements, and updates made in ASEP. We will not be answering questions during today's webinar, so please ask any questions that you have using the question feature. Questions submitted during the presentation will be used to create an FAQ document that will be posted along with the recording of today's presentation. The FAQ document and recording will be available on the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website. This training is presented by the TEA Division of Educator Data and Preparation Program Management. I am Program Specialist Emily Newton. Along with Jessica McLaughlin, we will be your presenters for today's webinar. TEA staff also attending include Program Specialist Vanessa Alba, Lori Ayers, Angela Von Hatten, and directors Mark Olafson and Tam Jones. Please note that hereafter in this webinar, when I refer to you, I'm referring to your EPP since you are here as a representative of your EPP. Our last Form and Function webinar was conducted in March 2019 and covered a number of rule changes and rule reminders. In this webinar, we will be providing an overview of some of the major rule changes that have occurred more recently. Please note, we may not cover all the rule changes made in TAC, so it is imperative that you go back and review all the rule changes yourself. We will discuss a few resources available for you to review changes in TAC towards the end of the webinar. Rule changes can be legislatively mandated, but may also result from stakeholder input. At times, staff may recommend revisions that help to clarify rules or bring them into alignment with other guidelines or initiatives. We recognize that it can be challenging to keep up with these changes and believe this training may be helpful to you. Another resource available to help you keep up to date on changes involving EPPs is the Educator Preparation Program's newsletter. We'll discuss this more throughout the presentation. It is also important to note that throughout the presentation, you will hear a number of acronyms used. We will refer to the Texas Administrative Code as TAC, Educator Preparation Programs as EPPs, Science of Teaching Reading as STR, and Pre-Admission Content Test as PACT. Before we jump into today's content, let's take a quick poll on how everyone is feeling with regard to navigating updates and changes made in TAC. When the poll appears on your screen, please select your response. What is your level of understanding of recent rule changes in TAC? I'll give everyone about 20 seconds or so to put in their response. All right, thank you for all your responses. And I'll go ahead and close the poll and share it with you all. So as you can see, we've got a variety here. About 17% are at a lower understanding, 45% at that moderate understanding, and 29% at a good understanding, and 7% is strong understanding. That's great. So our goal for today is for you all to leave with a better understanding of the rules and updates in TAC, and to also give you a few tips and resources that you may be able to use to help you keep up to date on future changes in TAC as well. So as mentioned previously, we will dive into the most recent updates made in TAC. As we will highlight updates on the horizon, we will also update updates on the horizon with STR and ASEP. More specifically, we will cover chapters 228, 230, and 235. Chapter 228 includes requirements for educator preparation programs. We'll start by taking a look at a few changes and updates made specifically in Chapter 228. We are very excited to share with you the updates to 19 TAC 228.1e. For the upcoming school year only, 2020-2021, 19 TAC 228.1e provides the following flexibility. First, it allows candidates to complete field-based experiences in virtual school settings. 2, it allows candidates to complete clinical teaching, internships, and practicums in virtual school settings. And 3, it allows field supervisors to complete formal observations in virtual synchronous and asynchronous settings. This means a teacher working in a virtual classroom setting can be observed by their field supervisor remotely. A teacher working in a face-to-face setting can be observed by their field supervisor remotely. And synchronous and asynchronous observations can be completed by field supervisors in real time or through a recording of the candidate. This is a great opportunity for all stakeholders involved. Moving forward, EPPs should consider how this new flexibility will look in their program and begin to inform candidates and field supervisors of the procedures that will need to be followed so requirements in TAC are still maintained. Before we move on to the next slide, I would like to draw your attention to the red effective date at the bottom of the slide. As we go through the presentation, you will notice we have included the specific effective dates on the slide for each rule change in TAC that we will be discussing. The next few updates in Chapter 228 are specific to closing and consolidating programs. It is likely the rule changes in this slide may not directly impact most of the EPPs joining us today, but we wanted to be sure this information is available to the programs that are closing or consolidating or are anticipating closure. First, 19 TAC 228.15A3 now states that closing EPPs cannot admit candidates or recommend candidates for intern or probationary certificates within 1 year of their August 31st closing date. The purpose of this requirement is to give candidates a fair opportunity to complete all requirements before the EPP is scheduled to close. Second, 19 TAC 228.155 mandates closing EPPs complete the technology fees payment. If you tuned into our ASEP webinar in August, we saw firsthand some of the great changes that have been made in ASEP and ECOS using the technology fees. We will review a few of these coveted updates later in the presentation. Third, 19 TAC 228.15e states that EPPs that fail to meet the requirements as described in 19 TAC 228.15a 1 through 5 may result in the revocation of the EPP's continuing approval to recommend candidates. Next, we will discuss a change in Chapter 228 related to the candidate's exit or dismissal from an EPP. 19 TAC 228.20h now requires all EPPs to have an exit policy for the dismissal of candidates a dismissal policy of candidates published, reviewed, and signed by candidates when they are admitted to a program. This ensures the appropriate policies and procedures are in place when a candidate's exit or is dismissed from an EPP. What does this mean for EPPs? This means EPPs need to 1, establish an exit policy if there is not already one in place. 2, publish said exit policy so applicants, candidates, and stakeholders can access it, such as on the EPP's website. 3, starting October 15th, 2020, admitted candidates will need to review and sign the exit policy. And 4, EPPs will need to retain this documentation in the candidate's record for a minimum of 5 years. The addition to 19 TAC 228.30C3 provides flexibility in who can provide the required instruction on mental health, substance abuse, and youth suicide. The update in TAC allows the EPP to acquire instruction from a list of recommended best practice programs or from an accredited institution of higher education or an alternative certification program as part of the degree plan. It is important to note that mental health, substance abuse, and youth suicide instruction is required curriculum for any candidate seeking initial certification in any class. This includes candidates seeking an initial classroom teaching certificate and initial non-teacher certificates, including principal, superintendent, reading specialist, educational diagnostician, school librarian, and school counselor. Recommended resources are available for EPPs on the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website. Additional resources are available on the Mental Health and Behavioral Health page on the TEA website. Look for the link that says Educator Preparation Programs Resources. Although this is not a new addition to TAC, a rule worth mentioning is 19 TAC 228.30C8A through C. While completing the 2019-2020 Continuing Approval Review Cycle, it was observed that EPPs may need a reminder of the digital literacy requirements. The digital literacy requirements in Chapter 228 require curriculum for candidates seeking initial certification in any class to include instruction on digital literacy. More specifically, the digital literacy instruction must 1. Align with the International Society for Technology and Education standards, 2. Provide effective evidence-based strategies to determine a person's degree of digital literacy, and 3. Include resources to address any deficiencies identified by the digital literacy evaluation. Next on the list for Chapter 228 involves non-teacher practicum experiences. 19 TAC 228.35E8B now states that non-teacher practicum experiences may not take place exclusively during the summer months. This means a non-teacher candidate must complete at least part of their practicum experience during the school year. Time spent completing practicum hours when school is in session allows candidates a valuable opportunity to engage with students and the opportunity to demonstrate proficiency in the non-teacher standards. EPPs should begin to convey this information to non-teacher candidates so the appropriate practicum arrangements may be made. Next, we will address the updates regarding the deactivation of candidate certificates. Before we get into the specifics, we would like to point out the changes made in 19 TAC 228.35E2B, Romanet 7 and 8, now have significantly simplified the deactivation process. If a candidate leaves an internship, the EPP, the campus or district, and the candidate must all inform each other within 1 week of the candidate's last day of the internship assignment. Written documentation should be retained by the EPP and also should be submitted to TEA via the help desk with a deactivation request so TEA can deactivate the candidate's certificate. The EPP must notify TEA within 2 calendar weeks of the candidate's last day. This means the certificate deactivation request and related documents must be submitted to TEA within 2 calendar weeks. 4 items of documentation are required when you request a certificate deactivation. Those 4 items are as follows. 1, a signed deactivation request on EPP letterhead. 2, evidence the EPP informed the candidate of the deactivation. 3, evidence the EPP informs the employing district or school of the deactivation. And 4, evidence of candidate resignation if applicable. The deactivation request letter requires the EPP to provide specific pieces of information. A letter template is available. Please contact your assigned program specialist to request a letter template. Please also remember that deactivation requests cannot be completed without the appropriate documentation. Another change in the certificate deactivation rules is effective October 15th, 2020. EPPs are required to communicate deactivation rules and requirements to candidates in campus or district personnel before the candidate begins the internship assignment. The EPP will need to retain the related documentation in the candidate's records. This is a significant change for EPPs, and moving forward, you will need to consider how you will build this process into your EPP policies and procedures. One EPP has suggested to us that they plan to add the required notification to the Statement of Eligibility document to ensure candidates and campus personnel are appropriately informed prior to the candidate's assignment start date. Next, we will review the changes in Chapter 228 surrounding out-of-state and out-of-country placements. 19 TAC 228.35 E9, C, and D provide guidance for candidates who must complete requirements for clinical teaching or a practicum outside of the state of Texas or outside of the United States as a result of specific circumstances. You'll notice first that internships have been removed from this rule, and it is now only references clinical teaching and practicum experiences. Next, it states 4 specific circumstances for which a candidate may be approved for clinical teaching or practicum outside of Texas. A candidate may be approved for a placement at a specific site based on 1, the military assignment of the candidate or a spouse. 2, an illness of the candidate or a family member for whom the candidate is a primary caretaker. 3, the candidate becoming the primary caretaker of a family member residing out of state. Or 4, the candidate's or spouse's transfer of employment. EPPs apply on behalf of the candidates to have the school placement approved by TEA. Per 19 TAC 229.96, there is a $500 fee associated with the application for approval of an out-of-state or out-of-country placement. Please contact your TEA assigned program specialist to receive a current copy of the out-of-state or out-of-country placement application. This change to Chapter 228 is necessary to provide flexibility to candidates who undergo major life changes and clarity to TEA staff, candidates, and EPPs. This provides flexibility with an emphasis on Texas-based clinical teaching and practicum experiences. It is worth noting again that out-of-state and out-of-country placements are not available for candidates completing an internship. The last update we will discuss for Chapter 228 covers test approval for candidates who have already completed an EPP and have returned to the EPP requesting test approval. The candidates discussed on this slide are already finishers on the finisher record list, but still need to complete testing requirements. Recent updates in 19 TAC 228.40D allow an EPP to require candidates to complete additional coursework to prove preparedness for a certification exam if 1, the candidate is seeking test approval for a certificate area where the standards or certification exam have changed since the candidate completed the EPP, or 2, if the candidate returns to an EPP for test approval 5 or more years following their completion of the EPP. Let's look at an example. A candidate who completed an EPP for principal EC through 12 certification, but was not standard certified before the principal EC through 12 certificate expired, would now need to take and pass the 268 and 368 exams to obtain a principal as instructional leader certificate. Registering for these exams requires the test approval of the EPP the candidate completed. With this update intact, EPPs may now require the candidate to complete additional coursework to prepare them for the 268 and 368 exams, because both the principal standards and certification exams have changed since the candidate completed the program. EPPs are encouraged to think about how they will want to implement this and develop policies, procedures, and resources to support the implementation. Now that we've covered changes in Chapter 228, let's do a quick self-check. On a scale of 1 to 5, how would you rate your level of understanding of updates made in Chapter 228? I'll give you all about 10 to 15 seconds to go ahead and submit your responses. Wonderful. Thank you so much for your feedback. All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll now. So it looks like we're at about 54% with a good understanding, 24% with a moderate understanding, and 17% with a strong understanding. That's great. So just a reminder, since we're not answering questions live during today's webinar, if you do have any questions, especially regarding Chapter 228, what we just covered, make sure you submit those questions using the question feature so we can include them in the FAQ document following the presentation. Chapter 230 includes rules for professional educator preparation and certification. Now let's take a look at the changes and updates made in Chapter 230. An update to Chapter 230 we are going to discuss includes the process for correcting a certificate. As of May 17th, 2020, to correct a candidate's intern or probationary certificate, the EPP must submit a letter of request and fee to TEA within 6 weeks of the certificate issuance date or within 6 weeks of the candidate's change in assignment. Along with formalizing the timeline for the EPP to inform TEA, 19 TAC 230.104B also requires candidates to inform the EPP of any change in their assignment within 7 days. This strict timeline means EPPs will want to review their processes for recommending candidates and issuing intern and probationary certificates to ensure candidate certificates are recommended appropriately and that all changes are done so within the 6-week window. Don't be afraid to enlist the help of your field supervisors with this. They play a valuable role in this process because they are required to contact the candidate within 3 weeks and conduct the first observation within the first 6 weeks. This would be a great opportunity to utilize field supervisors and have them help verify candidate placements and report any discrepancies promptly to the EPP. Now I'm going to take a quick break and pass the mic over to Jessica, and she's going to discuss Chapter 235 and the science of teaching reading.
Thanks, Emily. Let's start with Chapter 235. Chapter 235 governs the classroom teacher certification standards. Let's take a look at a few of the updates. In Chapter 235, 4 sets of classroom teacher standards were recently adopted and will be effective October 15th, 2020. These fields include bilingual Spanish standards, special education EC6 standards, special education 6 through 12 standards, and deaf-blind educator standards. These standards were developed by standards committees comprised of educators, including EPP faculty and staff, classroom teachers, and school and district leaders. Programs who offer preparation and certification in these fields should review the newly adopted standards and begin the process of updating their curriculum in alignment. Now that the standards have been adopted, TEA staff will begin the process of developing the certification pathways related to each of these sets of standards. So now let's discuss what's new in TAC related to the science of teaching reading. And I will say it's quite a bit that's new. First, we wanted to ground in our House Bill 3 Science of Teaching Reading exam requirement. House Bill 3 from the 86th legislature established the requirement that to earn a certificate to teach pre-K through grade 6, a candidate must demonstrate proficiency in the science of teaching reading on a new standalone certification exam starting January 1st, 2021. The intent of the House Bill 3 Science of Teaching Reading exam requirement is to ensure that teachers are ready and have the necessary knowledge and skills to develop strong foundational reading skills in all Texas children. A slate of rule changes were recently adopted to implement the House Bill 3 STR exam requirement. The primary focus of these rule changes were to implement 4 replacement certificate names for those certificate fields impacted by the House Bill 3 STR exam requirement that you can see on the screen. Specifically, the replacement certificate names included the language "with the science of teaching reading" into the certificate name. The rationale for the replacement of these certificate names was to signal the certificate holders demonstrated competency in the science of teaching reading and provide additional clarity for the field. In order to implement these House Bill 3 impacted replacement certificates, there were 4 key changes to rule. First, there were updates made to the testing chart to define the certification exams required. There was an addition of the certificate issuance requirements, the addition of the requirement that programs submit a letter of attestation to continue to offer these certification fields, and an update to the STR standards to ensure that they were applicable to teacher candidates in grades EC through 6. All of these rule changes are effective as of October 15th, 2020. First, Chapter 227.10A4C was updated to add the replacement certificate names to the PACT chart. The key takeaway here is that the PACT exams for the replacement certificates remain the same as those for the original certificates. Second, updates were made to the testing figure in Chapter 230.21, which governs the certification exam requirements for each certification field. The updates made to the testing figure included the addition of the replacement certificates and their required content pedagogy exams. The required content pedagogy exams for each of these 4 replacement certificate fields includes the addition of the Science of Teaching Reading exam. Additional updates include the addition of 2 new content pedagogy exams with their operational dates for the core subjects with Science of Teaching Reading EC6 and English Language Arts and Reading with the Science of Teaching Reading 4 through 8, respectively. For the core subjects with the Science of Teaching Reading EC6 certificates, candidates will be required to take the STR exam, as well as the core subjects EC6 content pedagogy exam. The core subjects EC6 has been updated to the new 391 core subjects EC6 in order to remove duplicative content that is now included on the STR exam. With the development of the 391 core subjects EC6, there was also the opportunity to reduce and redistribute content across the remaining subtests. In order to ensure smooth transition from the 291 to the 391, across the next 3-year period, both exams will be operational throughout the 2021 calendar year. So from January 2nd, 2021 through December 31st, 2021. It is recommended that first-time test takers take 391 after January 1, 2021. The intent of the year-long overlap in operational periods is to support those candidates who are still needing to pass specific 291 subtests. A passing score on the 291 can be used for issuance of the core subjects with the science teaching reading EC6 up to but no later than December 31st, 2022. Preparation materials and representative tests are available in the field now. These changes are representative of changes in rule that are included in both Chapter 230.21 and Chapter 233. Next, for the English language reading with the science teaching rating 4 through 8 certificates, candidates will be required to take the new 217 ELAR 4 through 8 Texas beginning January 1st, 2022. The new 217 ELAR 4 through 8 was updated to ensure alignment with updated ELAR TEKS. In terms of the exam transition period, the 117, which is the current content pedagogy exam, will be operational through December 31st, 2021, and the 217 will become operational after January 1, 2022. A passing score on the 117 can be used for issuance of the ELAR with STR 4 through 8 up to but no later than October 30th, 2022. The preparation manual and representative exam for the 217 ELAR 4 through 8 will be available in summer and fall 2021, respectively. These changes are representative of changes in rule to Chapter 230.21 and Chapter 233. In addition, changes to Chapter 233 codified the issuance dates for the original and replacement certificates. The final issuance date for the original slate of certificates is December 31st, 2020. The first issuance date for the replacement certificates is January 1st, 2021, in compliance with the House Bill 3 Science and Teaching Reading requirement. EPPs are encouraged to take proactive steps to communicate these certification requirements to candidates. It is the EPP's responsibility to communicate consistently and early with teacher candidates to ensure that they are well aware of these changes and take the necessary action to achieve their certification. For more information about the Science and Teaching Reading exam requirement, including resources that may be directly shared with candidates, please visit tea.texas.gov/STR. In addition to changes in rule related to the exam requirements, in Chapter 235, the Science of Teaching Reading standards have been reorganized to comply with the House Bill 3 mandate that requires that candidates who teach in grades EC6 demonstrate proficiency on the Science of Teaching Reading exam. The standards were reorganized to ensure their applicability to candidates who teach grades EC through 6. As an EPP, it is your responsibility to ensure that the curriculum, coursework, and training provided to candidates is up to date, relevant, and accurate. If your EPP offers any of the certificate fields listed on our previous slides, your next step is to review the updated standards and make the appropriate updates to curriculum as needed. With this upcoming addition of the Science of Teaching Reading to applicable certification fields, TAC has been updated to formalize the approval process for approving EPPs to continue to offer the certificate areas impacted by STR. Chapter 228.10G now states that EPPs must submit a letter of attestation signed by the program's legal authority on or before December 1st, 2020. This letter of attestation shows the EPP's intent to modify their curriculum to include the STR components by January 1st, 2021. EPP is already approved for core subjects EC6, core subjects 4 through 8, ELAR 4 through 8, or ELAR Social Studies 4 through 8, will need to submit the letter of attestation on or before December 1st, 2021. Those programs who do not submit the letter of attestation by the December 1st, 2020 deadline will have their ability to issue these certificate areas removed. The template of the STR letter of attestation is available on the program provider resource page on the TEA website. And again, the letter of attestation should be submitted to the EPP's assigned program specialist. With that, I'm going to turn it back over to Emily.
All right, thank you, Jessica. We appreciate all that information on STR in Chapter 235. Now that we've covered the recent updates made in TAC and STR, we also wanted to highlight a few updates made in ASEP using the technology fees provided by EPPs. With the conclusion of ASEP reporting for 2019-2020 being just a few weeks ago, we thought it would be important to highlight some of the updates in ASEP that not only made state reporting a smoother process, but have also simplified the EPP's process for monitoring, reporting, and updating candidate records in ASEP throughout the reporting year. First, EPPs can now download an Excel spreadsheet and text file for candidate observations, candidate admission records, candidate test approval, and candidates on the finisher record list. This capability allows EPPs to easily access the candidate records already uploaded to ASEP. The downloadable lists are also helpful because they can then be used to support bulk upload and observations, admission records, and even changing a candidate's status on the finisher record list. This brings us to the second ASEP update, bulk upload. Being able to upload candidate admission records or observations using bulk upload can be a huge time saver, especially for programs with a high volume of candidates. Getting the Excel spreadsheet or text file to be just right can be sometimes tricky, but practice will certainly help, and don't forget the guidance on the bulk upload tabs in ASEP. Be sure to follow the directions to a T. The third ASEP update we will be highlighting is the admission record. This feature was new effective September 1st, 2019. But this is still important to highlight because all EPPs must create admission records for all candidates being admitted into any program within the EPP. When a new candidate is admitted into an EPP, remember, EPPs must report the candidate to TEA within 7 days of the candidate's formal admission date. This is required in TAC. What this means is the candidate must have an admission record in ASEP created within 7 days of the candidate's formal admission date. When an admission record is created, 3 things happen. 1, the candidate has been reported to TEA. 2, the candidate is added to the finisher record list on the other enrolled for the current reporting year. And 3, the corresponding certification exams are added to the candidate's test approval list. These 3 steps do not need to be taken separately. Thanks to the technology fees and the hardworking IT team, all EPPs have to do is create an admission record, and the candidate and the test approvals and finisher record list addition will automatically occur. The final ASEP update includes observations. When you upload your non-teacher observations, you will now see the non-teach option available in the assignment drop-down menu. All non-teacher observations are required to be uploaded and should use the non-teacher assignment type. Remember, observations can and should be reported throughout the year. Why wait until August when you can report your observations now and as you go throughout the year? As we move forward into 2020-2021 reporting year, we just want to remind you of these capabilities are here to help. Don't forget to report your candidates and data promptly and accurately. Moving forward, EPPs are encouraged to run ASEP and related analysis where applicable. ASEP reporting only comes once a year, but cumulative efforts over the entire year will continue to help solidify your data. Additionally, we are excited to share an ASEP retrospective webinar that an ASEP retrospective webinar is in the works. This webinar will give a brief yet reflective look back on the 2019-2020 ASEP reporting to review what went well, what needs improving, and next steps moving forward. Be on the lookout for this webinar date, time, and registration link. And as always, please, EPPs are encouraged to report data throughout the year, including observation data, in an effort to simplify your end-of-year reporting. Our last item for today is to discuss how you find out about updates in TAC. Let's start by addressing how you typically stay current on changes made to rules in TAC. I'll give you about 10 seconds to answer the poll. Great, thank you so much for your feedback, everyone. All right, we'll go ahead and close the poll. All right, so it looks like we have about 12% don't stay up to date. That's all right. It's great. You're taking a great first step being in on the webinar to learn some tools that we have. 59% of you tune into SPEC or SBOE meetings. 36% talk to their assigned program specialist, and 32% talk to other EPPs. That's great feedback. Thank you again so much. So, along with reviewing some of the more recent changes in TAC, we also wanted to provide you with a few tools and resources available to help you keep up to date on future changes in TAC. The first resource we have is the Texas Educator Preparation Program newsletter. This weekly newsletter not only provides updates on SPEC, rules, and legislation, but it also provides support and guidance on relevant topics related to educator preparation programs, educator testing, and educator standards. If you haven't signed up yet, make sure you contact your assigned program specialist for the link to add your email to the listserv. And if you have already signed up but are not receiving the newsletter, be sure to check your spam folder just in case. Next, we have the Texas Administrative Code. TAC should be every EPP's go-to guide. TAC not only reflects current rule changes that are in effect, but it also includes the specific dates the rules went into effect. We understand that interpreting TAC can sometimes be challenging, so don't forget your assigned program specialist at TEA is always here to help, support, and guide you as needed. The best way to keep up to date on, another great way to keep up to date on changes in TAC is to tune in to SPEC meetings. SPEC meetings are not only a time for you to learn about rule changes as they are proposed and adopted, but it is also your opportunity to share your public opinion through open comments and participation in the rulemaking process directly. Last but not least, another way for you to stay informed on updates made in TAC is through scheduled webinars and workshops provided by TEA. TAC is intertwined into almost every aspect of educator preparation programs, and the webinars like the one we have today and workshops like the new Certification Officer workshop provides continued support regarding TAC and will always include up-to-date information. Now that we have reviewed changes to rules in TAC, STR, and ASEP, and discussed a few ways to keep up to date on these changes as they occur, Let's spiral back to our original question. Now that we've learned this information, what would you say is your level of understanding of recent rule changes in TAC? I'll give you about 10 seconds to answer the poll. All right. Go ahead and close the poll and share the responses. So as you can see, if you remember from our poll that we had earlier in the webinar, there were attendees that had numbers or percentages in low understanding, moderate, good, and strong. So I can definitely tell that there's been a shift in the percentages where there's a lot more in the good understanding and even in the strong understanding. So our hope is that throughout this webinar, you've not only learned about some of the more recent updates in TAC, but have also added a few tools to your toolbox to keep up to date on TAC. Remember, we will not be answering questions live during today's webinar, so please make sure you've submitted any questions that you have so that we can use them in an FAQ document following the presentation. The FAQ document and today's recording will be posted to the Program Provider Resources page on the TEA website. Thank you so much for your attendance. We hope you have a better understanding of the recent updates made in TAC and can implement these updates seamlessly. If you have any additional questions following the webinar, please don't hesitate to contact your assigned program specialist. A brief survey will appear following the conclusion of the webinar. If you are willing and able, please complete the 4-question survey. We value and appreciate your feedback. Thank you for your time and have a great day.